Hello, America. For the past few weeks, more and more claims have been coming out about fraud in the 2020 elections. It's a fire hose. Nobody has time to digest and verify all of them, and for some of them, there's no possible way to verify them. But all the same, there are people on each side totally convinced that there's no way large-scale election fraud could have happened, or that massive election fraud 100% definitely happened. And whichever one is the truth, it has really damaging consequences for our democracy. So with the massive amount of new information constantly coming out, can we come to a reasonable conclusion without having to spend days researching every detail of every accusation? I can't tell you the single right answer, but here's how I think about it. In this first video, let's talk about the process. How are we going to get an answer? Then in the next installments, I'll talk you through what conclusions I'm drawing, so be sure to subscribe if you want to hear those. First, let's get clear on what the problem is. So what values do people think are being threatened? Why is it so concerning? And how exactly do they think they're being threatened? What's actually being claimed? Second, how do we figure out whether or not the claims are true? We'll expand on this one later. There are three main values that people are worried about right now: the integrity of our electoral process, the peaceful transfer of power, and whether their candidate will win. That last one shouldn't be a concern if we're trying to do what's best for the country as a whole, so we won't dive into that one, but it does look like that's a big factor in how a lot of people are judging this, whether they realize it or not. Now, if either of those first two are compromised, that's a big deal. They're both core components of our democracy. We need an electoral process we can trust to ensure that whoever becomes president is the person that truly reflects the will of the people. And we need smooth, peaceful transitions of power, because if portions of the populace or government are following two different presidents, then at best, that fracture is going to lead to gridlock and unrest, or at worst, outright violence and fragmentation of the Union. So if either of these were to fail, I think that should be very concerning. And we know that at least one, if not both of these, are failing. President Trump and his team say they've found massive voter fraud, so the only possibilities now are that either he's right, in which case immensely powerful people have dedicated massive resources to stealing an election and covering it up, completely undermining our most fundamental democratic process, or he's wrong, in which case, well, he's the immensely powerful person that's dedicating massive campaign and government resources to keeping himself in power against the will of the people and undermining our own faith in our democratic process for personal gain. We should be real mad at somebody, but at this stage, we're just not sure who yet, so let's keep thinking this through. Now, we keep talking about fraud allegations, but what exactly is being alleged? To help understand this, let's lay out the voting process. Voters decide who they're going to vote for. They get a ballot, fill it out, and submit it. All this can be either at the polling center or with the mail-in ballot. The ballots are then collected and verified, processed for counting. Then the official totals are tallied and certified. Finally, the electors representing each candidate go off to the Electoral College and officially pick the next president. This here is everything we do to decide who the next president is. That's a long chain of events. It's no wonder there seems like a lot of opportunities for shenanigans, and there have been claims of shenanigans at every part of this chain. In 2016, Democrats claimed that Russians influenced voter decisions by manipulating information and how it's shared. In 2020, Republicans are making similar allegations in that Twitter, Facebook, and other social media are censoring information favorable to conservatives. Other claims are that people are voting more than once, or voting for dead people or stealing identities to vote. That fraudulent ballots were created and brought straight into the counting centers. That states changed how votes are counted close to the election and therefore biased the system towards Democrats. That ballot counters changed or threw out ballots. That ballots that weren't supposed to be counted were counted, and that software either switched votes or changed totals. There are also some allegations against Republicans in this process, but for now let's just stick with the claims from Trump's team. And for each of these, there's different claims about the magnitude of fraud across different precincts or states. So with all of these allegations, how can we possibly know what's true? Well, we look at the evidence for each one. That's the only way to know for sure. Ideally, we'd have direct evidence, like paper trails, recordings, or multiple witnesses who saw the same crime. or indirect circumstantial evidence, like analytics that can help prove something was wrong even if we can't prove the exact mechanism, or suspicious behavior, like blocking observers from watching the counting. But sometimes, that evidence might not be accessible to us, or might not exist at all in a he said, she said situation. So what else can we do to form a reasonable opinion in the many cases where we can't access or sift through evidence? Well, as long as we keep an open mind that we might be wrong, we can make a best guess with the information we do have available. We can start with an inventory of the major players, and for each, what are their motivations, their means, their opportunity, and credibility to decide, is this logically plausible based on what I know? Quick commentary here. I think a lot of people don't know much about the opportunity part when it comes to elections. So what defenses are already in place to keep interference attempts from happening? Knowing that the DNC has the means to hack into a voting machine is great, but do we know if those machines are even hooked up to the internet, or are they disconnected as a precaution against that? It's like I mentioned in my gun control video. A lot of liberals march and advocate for mandatory background checks on all gun sales, maybe not realizing it already is required for all licensed dealers. Now, we may have gotten ourselves organized, but it's still a lot of stuff to go through. If you're working a full-time job and just catching up on news sporadically, it's just not realistic to spend that amount of time just to get a very basic opinion on important civic issues like this. So to help with that, we can adjust our level of detail depending on how much time we have. The best way is to get as detailed as possible. Each individual claim should be evaluated on its own merits and its own evidence. But if we can't do that, we can always prioritize them by relevance. In this case, that'd be based on their impact, so does it just affect a few hundred votes or a few 100,000? And their intention. So were these just technical mistakes in filling out the ballots, or something nefarious like Trump is claiming? Or we can step back and look at the big picture. So, in general, was there likely to be widespread election fraud by the Democrats? It's always good anyways to have some kind of initial answer so that we at least have some educated guess before diving into the details. Now, regardless of which level of detail you're thinking through, you need to identify who the key players are. So let's talk through those as our final topic. You have four main categories. Political groups at the local, state, and federal levels, so Democrats, Republicans, and independents. You have information brokers, like the news media and social media. There are enablers, like voting machine companies, mail carriers, and poll workers. And you have outside interests, corporations, foreign adversaries, or the ultra-wealthy. Each of these groups have certain motivations and resources that can help give us hints towards who's right. But I think this is a good breakpoint for this video. We outlined the main election fraud concerns and process I'll be following and some of the major players involved. In the next video, I'll share what conclusions I'm drawing at that aggregate, less detailed level, and in subsequent videos, I'll evaluate specific claims, so be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out on those. In the meantime, let me know in the comments if this impacts how you're thinking about these fraud claims and what conclusions you're drawing from it, or let me know if I missed something important altogether. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.